Right.
What's that, mate? Good evening, ladies and gents, wherever you may be around the world, and welcome to Splendid Isolation number 192. I'm going to start us off with a bit of a tune. Where are we? What do I have to do? I have to do that. Yes, great. Boom, 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 boom. All right, there we go.
Take up the white man's burden, send forth the best ye breed. Go bind your sons to exile, to serve your captives need, to wait in heavy harness on flooded folk and wild. Your new God sullen peoples have devil and have child. Take up the white man's burden, in patience to abide, to veil the threats of terror and check the show of pride. By open speech and simple, 100 times they claim to seek another's profit and work another's gain. Take up the white man's burden, the savage mouth of famine, and bid the sickness cease. And when your goal is nearest, the end for others sought, what's love that Eden folly, bring all your hopes to Lord. Take up the white man's burden, not tawdry rule of kings, but toil of serf and sweeper, the tale of common things. The pots ye shall not enter, the roads ye shall not tread. Go make them with your living and mark them with your dead. Take up the white man's burden and reap his old reward. The blame of those ye better, the hate of those ye guard, the cry of those ye humor are slowly towards the light. Why brought ye us from bondage, our loved Egyptian guys? Take up the white man's burden, ye dare not stoop to less, nor call too loud on freedom to cloak your weariness. By all ye cry or whisper, by all ye leave or do, the silent, sullen people shall wait on God and you. Take up the white man's burden, have done with childish days, the lightly prophet laurel, the easy young God's praise. Come down to search your manhood through all of thankless years. No age with dear but wisdom, the judgment of your peers. Take off the white man's burden through all the thankless years.
Yeah, and that was the excellent Chris Gard. Do go and check out his YouTube channel. And obviously based on a Rudyard Kipling poem. How are you doing this evening, Mitch?
I don't know why we started early. It's only 8:30.
How is it 8:30 in the UK now?
Yeah.
Is it? Okay, so have your clocks changed?
Not what I've noticed.
Must be my clocks that have changed, but must be my clocks that have changed, Mitch. Okay. Apologies, because I thought we started 15 minutes late, but there we go. Sorry, guys. I got a new computer thanks to a friend of mine a week or so ago, and I got a new USB device just recently, which I have been trying to fix all day. And I don't know if I fixed it or not. People in the chat can tell me how good the sound is, which is what I've been trying to fix. So there we go.
Yeah, the clocks won't change until the 27th.
It must be my clocks that have changed, Mitch, which I didn't realize, quite frankly. So there we go. I don't pay a lot of attention to these things. So what can I say?
As for first topic, I mean, you do you want to start it? Because
No, you go for it, Mitch. Go for it.
Well, so in short, Chagos Islands. Well, the negotiations of them started like 2 years back with Cleverly as Foreign Secretary. And the other day it was announced, oh, we're going to give him over to Mauritius. And
but
if it's not,
Mitch, forgive me if I'm not correct, but the Conservative Party, like the so-called in air quotes Conservative Party, actually abandoned these negotiations, as far as I know, last year.
this deal that is reportedly meant to be made, there's no way this has all been negotiated all in the space of 100 days. You can tell that I'm guessing the Tories did some of the negotiating of a deal. But, for example,
but to give them their due, and I hate them, like, anyone who follows this channel will know that I hate the so-called Conservative Party. They did walk away from this deal last year and said, no, we're not going to do it. Is that fair, Mitch?
Well, I mean, you take how long a negotiation of this sort takes. It's a lot more than 100 days, so you can imagine.
Yeah, but don't forget David Lammy did it. Don't forget David Lammy did it. David Lammy is undoubtedly the most moronic British Foreign Secretary there's ever been.
So cleverly,
and also Lammy hates everything about Britain except his paycheck that he gets from the British taxpayers.
Would you not say the same as James Cleverly? He doesn't give.
Oh yeah, I don't like. I didn't like that guy either, Mitch. Absolutely, but even he was not quite as stupid as Lammy is. But I mean, Lammy is like watch David Lammy on Mastermind. I would just say that to everybody,
I'd say Cleverly doesn't give a damn about Britain either.
No, absolutely, also true, Mitch. Yeah, and for the same reason as Lammy, not really British, So
we're both not British, or we're both black.
Yeah, so they're both not really British people. They're not Anglo-Celtic white British people at all. But yeah, no, I'm no fan of Cleverly, but even he walked away from this deal. But of course, Two-Tier Care and David Dumb Lammy just thought it was a great deal. I mean, what is not good about giving up British territory and making the British taxpayer pay for giving up that territory for the next 99 years? Who wouldn't support that deal?
Yeah, and but the thing was, like, the main thing that was sidetracking the deal was, was it Diego Garcia, I believe it was, where the base is, and the Americans.
There's a big American base on Diego Garcia, which the Americans used to pay the British for, but we're now going to pay Mauritius to give it to China.
Yeah, and as you saw, Blinken is well chuffed with this deal. So
yeah, I'm sure he thinks it's great. Yeah,
yeah,
but
because
Blinken's the same guy who is taking half the U.S. Navy to go and fight for Israel, and these are not the brightest tools in the shed, Mitch.
and I was and the thing is, I mean, the Americans seem to be chuffed with this deal, and I mean, as regards the American response, I mean, it's just typical of America. But I'd say like in regards to this thing about Mauritius, I mean, the main thing that offends me is I mean, there was this guy called Sir Humphrey on Twitter. He basically comes across as a civil servant midwit. Who go, oh well, yeah. He basically said, oh well, all these people took over Chagos Islands. They didn't even hear of it until today. And I was like, thinking to myself, yeah, well, like, there's a village in Lincolnshire I know, Lusby, that I never heard of. But I'm pretty sure we'd all be pissed off if that village was sold out to Liechtenstein tomorrow.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
I mean, look, I'd certainly heard of the British Indian Ocean Territory, which is what this place is formally called.
they would call it Biot. They would call it Biot.
Yeah, that's right. Biot, British Indian Ocean Territory. It's actually a quite big archipelago of islands, and they're in a very important strategic position. And funnily enough, of recent years, the Royal Navy has been using them more and more. Like there are 2 Royal Navy warships now permanently based in the Pacific. Next year, there is supposed to be a British SSN nuclear-powered hunter-killer submarine. It's going to be based in Perth in Australia. And the British Indian Ocean Territory is much the nearest British-owned naval base to that area. Like obviously you have Pitcairn Island, but that doesn't even have a harbour, in the Pacific, which is British.
Well, how awkward is going to be logistically, because you got to think we don't control Suez anymore. Okay.
Yep.
So let's say you dispatch a ship from, let's say, Portsmouth, for argument's sake, and you sail that, let's say, submarine or whatever, from Portsmouth all the way to Perth, which is like the nearest port.
Round Africa, most likely. Goes round Africa, most likely, and then through the Indian Ocean, which is where the British Indian Ocean Territory is. Strange to say.
I'll just the only caveat I'm going to say is I'm just going to call it Biot in future, just because I can't be because it's such a mouthful to say what the full initial stands for. So just to make sure I don't confuse you when I say Biot a lot more.
But yeah, you would obviously sail around Africa because if you're a nuclear-powered hunter-killer submarine, you're not going through the Suez Canal, obviously. So you're going to sail around Africa and then sail across the Indian Ocean. Guess where Biot is? It's in the middle of the Indian Ocean.
Yeah, it's how awkward is it going to be logistically? Because in fact, I mean, I don't know. Perhaps it's because I played too much Europe and the size 4 with this Age of Sail kind of ships. But I mean, imagine you have because of course Africa isn't. We don't have I assume we don't have safe moorings anymore. With let's say there's like South Africa, but or Mauritius. But you can imagine you need something like the Biot territory to as like a midpoint, so they stock up on provisions.
Yeah, and particularly if your ship or submarine gets damaged, either from an accident or from enemy action or something like that, kind of good to have a British-owned base in the Indian Ocean, but not according to Tier Care. two-tier care wants to give it to Mauritius, and Mauritius has never had anything to do with the British Indian Ocean Territory. It's like almost 2,000 miles away from it, and the BIOT, the British Indian Ocean Territory, has been British since 1814.
I think it was 1810, but also another.
Yeah, it might be. It might be. Maybe. It's basically 200 years, pretty much.
Yeah, and like the only other thing was so the people living there, they don't like Mauritius, like because the people of Mauritius are like a different ethnic group, I believe, and
Yes,
they don't like and they don't like the Chagossians. So the Chagossian people, 3,000 of them, I believe, who are all British citizens by law. We just two-tier queer as two whatever you want to call them, two queer as just sold them out practically.
Accurate.
Thanks, Simon. You are correct. I mean, yeah, no, they have nothing to do with the place. Mauritius, of course, is also quite a big ally of the Chinese Communist Party, which is puzzling. You know, why is Britain selling British islands that have been British for 200 years to an ally of the Chinese Communist Party? And in fact, we're not even selling them. The deal that two-tier care and moronic Lamy have come up with will actually require the British taxpayer to pay Mauritius for the next 99 years millions and millions of pounds to take over this British territory.
Yeah, it's worth noting also Labour spent the last few years bollocking the Tories, saying we weren't preparing us for war with like Russia or China.
Yep.
But then they go and do this.
Yep. And of course, before I hand this over to more from Mitch and to Alman, the other thing that has happened, and anyone except a moron like Lamy or two-tier care would have known this would happen, is because the British government is claiming they're going to do this. Obviously, immediately, Spain and Argentina have piped up, and Spain has said, well, if you can do this with the British Indian Ocean Territory, you can obviously do this with Gibraltar. And the Argentinians have piped up and said, well, if you can do this with BIOT, you can obviously do this with the Falkland Islands. And anyone but a moron, like two-tier care and David Lamy, would have worked this out. And I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I remember, you guys are probably too young, but I actually remember the Falklands War. Like, I joined the military the year after the Falklands War. I know. Yeah, you guys are not. Yeah, you guys are not old enough to remember it.
Yeah, I was born in 2001. So,
I actually know Royal Navy sailors, Royal Marines, British Army soldiers who fought there and who lost mates there in the Falklands. And two-tier care and idiot Lamy, and as I say, the only thing Lamy likes about Britain is his taxpayer-funded salary, which he certainly doesn't earn. They don't give a shit about all the dead guys who died in the Falklands, some of whom were buried there, some of them buried at sea from Royal Navy warships. But this crappy deal, which, by the way, Labour tried to do on the quiet while Parliament was in recess. You know, there were no MPs in Westminster. Labour tried to do this on the quiet, and it's blown up in their face, I'm happy to say. But yeah, it's just ridiculous what's going on at the moment. You know, you don't give up British territory, because as soon as you do, you get the likes of Argentina and Spain saying, well, we want Gibraltar, we want the Falkland Islands, and all the rest of it.
I mean, this is one of the things that's come out of this, is that there's now sort of like 3 distinct factions when it comes to foreign policy in the UK. And of course, they're all kind of horseshit on the American foreign policy positions, because they're all the same. But when it comes to an instance where you can actually express some British sentiment in foreign policy, they spread out into these 3 factions. So you've got like, there's this weird like Labour faction where they're the ones that say like, oh, we're giving it back to Mauritius.
It was never Mauritian.
Yeah,
but okay.
Yeah, of course. And they'll suddenly come out and say stuff like about how like the Mauritians on the island, this, that, and the other, and you kind of sit there and you think, okay, first off, like rudimentary, stupid take on ethnicity, right? Secondly, this whole like as British as you or I magic soil stuff just completely wilts away like in a heartbeat. And then you've got the other faction is like there's this guy. I just blocked him. I don't have time for people like that. But there's this guy. He calls himself like Sir Humphrey after the Yes Prime Minister character on Twitter, on X, on Zitter.
I think that is the guy who Mitch was talking about.
Right. Yeah, I missed the first part. So yeah, of course he's like, it doesn't matter. Like what's the difference in the deal? And it's like, well, the difference in the deal, of course, is that you're signaling to the rest of the world that our government's a soft touch.
Yeah. And
all these things are up for grabs. And of course, the difference in the deal is that we have to give Mauritius money and lose sovereignty of territory for literally no good reason at all. And then, of course, the other faction, and all 3 of these factions I dislike. The other faction, of course, is that is the sort of slightly old school bulldog nationalist rah-rah guys who kind of you think are on our side, but then you realize they're all civnats. And like they're like, whoa, get all angry about like, let's say the Falklands. UKIP brought this up, I noticed, about like the Falklands, or in this instance these islands. But they won't like give a shit about all the stuff that's happening domestically back home. But they expect you to sort of dive in and carry water for them at a moment's notice.
What's your own position, Adam? Because I'll express my position after you have. But what's your position?
I think if I was forced, if you could give me like, if you could offer me like, you know, the 2 pills, and one was Britain gives up its overseas territory and maybe the Union ends, but what's left over is a British Isles that's full of actual British people, and of course, and a based future, I would take that. Even though it's a bit of a step back, it's also many, many steps forward in other ways. But of course, there's not really any instance where one is precipitated on the other. A government who was strong on immigration and potentially also pushed remigration inevitably would also be able to hold all those overseas territories, no matter what the cucked, retarded soft power guys are always crying about.
Yep, totally agree.
Yeah, because of course the funny thing is as well, that we've seen, was this the Chagos Island thing that highlighted this, or was it something else? There was something that happened over the last 2 weeks, and I remember thinking like, well, that's it for the soft power argument. Like, it was always horseshit. This whole idea that we had to like cuck to like American foreign policy and bang on about like diversity and inclusion and accept, you know, a million Somalians a year, otherwise the rest of the world would laugh at us, is obviously absurd.
I don't think any of us agree with that. Like, the gay American empire is not something any of us support.
Well, yeah. In fact, I will actually point out, for all the Remainer guys, I voted Remain, right? But for all the Remainer guys, I voted for it for based and racist reasons, I'll point out. For all the Remainer guys that used to bang on about how we had to be in the EU and how we had to accept all these policies and those policy decisions and all this horseshit, all the stuff they just happen to believe in as you know, that one little 5% block of the population. They they would they of course used to say, oh well, we'll be a laughing stock of this region or that region. I can actually point out we are a laughing stock now because of mass immigration. I actually had an email at work. I won't go into any details, but we have a German client who's trying to import stuff into Britain on behalf of a Polish client of his, and they can't get the product in. It's very innocuous product, but because of like various bureaucratic and difficult codes, and the fact that when they ring up to the department that they have to sort this through, the department's full of foreigners who can barely speak English, he got very irate. The goods were stuck for I think 10 days in some sort of
sounds like
facility.
talking to Amazon.
Yeah, and he ended up sending a very angry email with I believe it was some people from HMRC and ourselves copied in, where he said if you're not willing to take my money, how are you going to hope to pay for all these immigrants? So in a way, yeah, like sorry, soft power guys, but we've actually already been reduced to a laughing stock amongst these people, and it's because of exactly the policies you said we had to follow for all these years. And suddenly they don't care about any of that stuff. Suddenly all of that's evaporated. So it was almost as if they, it was just you have to do what I say or low status for you, which is always the only argument they've ever had. So,
all right. Well, I've kind of had this discussion on in John's Discord on the Worcester Club, and John kind of took the position he didn't care largely, and then other people didn't agree, including me. And I remember I've had conversations with Mitch, for example. And don't worry, Mitch, I'll let you comment on this before I say anything much more about it. Where we have discussed if Britain did do re-immigration, we might get pushback from quite a lot of places around the world. And my argument about this, because I totally support eventual re-migration from Britain, is that Britain had better be a powerful country. And every single strategic group of islands you lose around the world makes you weaker and less able to control your fate. That's my view. But, Mitch,
well, I will just say quickly, when we last had John on, I like John, but when we had John,
I like John too.
He did kind of badmouth Steve Laws a little bit, and I feel I'm not holding that against him, but I do feel a little bad that I didn't stick up for Steve Laws more, because I've since met Steve Laws in person, and he was a very cool guy. So, and I've listened to more of what he had to say, and seen him actually defend his position, and I'm more convinced by it.
I think, and from what I recall, because I like Steve Laws and I follow him on Twitter, I'm pretty sure I stood up for Steve Laws a bit because I like him. So, and like I say, I think re-migration is inevitable for Britain. But if we're going to do that, we had better be a powerful and influential country, and we better be able to say to big, massive nations like the USA, who have a big base on the British Indian Ocean territory, well, if you don't like us doing re-migration, we can always get rid of your base, boys.
Yeah,
we had better be able to do that.
Yeah,
I've got an even more fundamental reason that we should. Well, I've got several more fundamental reasons we should keep it. But this was my initial thought when I saw it was, if Britain is going to carve its own path in due course, and we are going to have re-migration and what have you, which I desperately hope we will have, and if we don't, we're going to lose the nation. We had better be able to say to big, powerful countries like the USA, British Indian Ocean territory, guys, that's a very big American naval base. You don't like what we're doing? Well, we'll close your base down if you really don't like it,
I do think that's going to be like if it ever comes, well, when it comes to the point where what we would normally call the right can take sort of power in a sort of meaningful way in this country, I do think that's going to be the real obstacle in front of us, is going to be turfing out a lot of these American bases from our sphere of influence.
Absolutely right.
That's a really, really. Are you going to have like a Checkpoint Charlie scenario where you have to have, because if it comes to the point where it's our people facing off their people, they're obviously just gonna stand there.
Well, you see, the thing is, they can't do that on islands that Britain owns, but they can certainly do it on a base that we merely share with the Americans on islands that are owned by Mauritius, that the British taxpayer is paying Mauritius to take over.
Yeah, I think this is where like a halfway house on the Maloney position, as much as people think she's a disappointment, I do think there's something to that. I think if you get into a position where you can assist America in some foreign policy that doesn't bother you so much, that gives you some leverage over them in other theaters.
Of course it does. Yes.
That doesn't mean, of course, that we have to immediately go signing up and sending troops into Ukraine alongside them or anything. But as you say, it could just be allowing them to continue leasing land that their base is on in a vital strategic point to them in Asia.
There are thousands of US Marines at the moment who are basically based on the two sovereign British bases, which are British owned overseas territory on Cyprus.
Yeah.
Does that give Britain a certain amount of influence over the Americans? Yeah, it does. Yes, it does. Does the British Indian Ocean Territory, being the British Indian Ocean Territory, give the British a certain amount of influence over the Americans? I mean, assuming you have like an actual man as prime minister and not a weak, probably gay guy like two-tier care. But if you had an actual British prime minister, yeah, of course it would. It would give you quite considerable influence over them, actually.
And we've paid a foreign country for them to take that leverage off of us.
Yeah, it's insanity. It's insanity. Mitch, I'd like to hear what you think, because you have a nice avatar this week with two-tier care.
Two-tier queer.
Yeah, that's more accurate, I suspect. But yeah.
Well, I mean, my perspective on stuff like this is, look, I don't agree with, like, because you have Enoch Powell, for example, he says, "Oh well, we must." I forget what he said, because John echoed it in the discourse of a way going, Enoch Powell said, "Oh, we should just abandon all that is to do with the empire." So, like, for example, stuff like this happening with the Chagos Islands should just be forgotten about. And I'm sort of thinking, well, I mean, there's a certain prestige to that, but there's also the fact that, well, look, we have other interests, like we have Australia and New Zealand and Canada, who are sort of kindred to us.
Yep.
And we have, like, sort of, that sort of brotherhood along ethnic lines. Yeah, like, that's why you need bases, like, so, because, I mean, you need it. I mean, I'm not even a big fan of the Kanzuk thing, because I just think America will never let us ally with Australia, New Zealand, and Canada separate from them. And I'm more of a pan-Europeanist these days. But the fact is, I'd also say, well, in a world like this where we've got China, who I would argue are a threat, you're going to need bases. You'll need more influence. You need... I just see it as you just have more leverage in the world.
Yeah.
And it's also the fact that and I just don't buy this whole Little England mindset of, oh, well, we should just only care... Like, because... Oh no, we've got demographic problems of it. We should just only care about that and not care about anything else whatsoever. It's just a mindset.
I absolutely agree with you, Mitch. The Little Englander mindset to me is foolish, because I remember having this discussion with you, and I think it was mainly in the Discord, but we may have mentioned it online. That if push comes to shove, and we actually are going to do remigration, I believe you argued that the US would be absolutely against that.
Yeah, the word it depends. I mean,
and listen, I don't disagree with you, particularly if it was a Kamala Harris, Biden type president. Absolutely correct, but I don't think they'd go to war with us, but they would put huge economic pressure on us. And what does Britain have to push back with? Well, funnily enough, holding really, really vital American bases like on the British Indian Ocean territory is one of the things we could push back with. Don't you think, Mitch?
Well, yeah, that's one way we can push back. But also say, well, look, because you argue against it all the time, it's true though. Like, the fact is, I suppose you've got Trump on that voice. What was it like? There was a material coming up. I think it was this week or the previous week saying one of the housing policies is mass deportation to ease demand, basically. And he said, I think, yeah. So you can imagine if we were to do remigration, for example, under Trump, then we'd just be left alone to our own devices. Just as long as we don't upset the apple cart too much in doing so. So long as we don't weaken ourselves or cause shit with neighbors or whatever, America would let us do. Unless Trump, but under someone like Hornblower, yeah, it would never happen. They'd bomb us, and you
All
can
right,
say
but
what you want.
the point I'm trying to make, Mitch, is that I there's no way there's going to be a war about it, right? That's
There would
not
be.
it. Well, I don't think so. I don't think it's a practical proposition.
Americans are the most propagandized population on the planet. Like, you can get them to say anything.
Yeah,
Like,
I really. All right, I don't listen. If I think we would need to do a special stream about this to some degree to try and get to the nitty-gritty of it, but I don't think it's a practical proposition for the Americans, even under someone like Harris, who's basically a socialist communist person. Even under them, I don't think they could do that. Okay, but
they can.
But they could definitely put economic pressure, sanctions, that sort of things on us, and they might. And that's when having things like the British Indian Ocean territory, where there's a very important American base, it's kind of vital for the Americans, actually. If they use B-52 bombers on Iran, they'll fly out of the Chagos Islands, right? It's a very, very important base for the Americans. And that is when you want that to be British sovereign territory, so that a good right-wing British prime minister can turn around and say to the Americans, well, you want to put economic sanctions on us because we're sending Pakistanis back to Pakistan or whatever it might be. Guess what? Your base is in danger.
Can I just say to Mitch's point, that outside of like our events where I've met some Americans, every American that I've met in IRL was massively leftist and very politicized. I mean, I've told the story on here before about like the guy that came out who was American, who came out to service my Hoover, which is a very weird kind of immigrant to come across. But he was sitting there trying to tell me in my own home about how about how Britain was like sexist and racist, and
oh my God.
And all about all the slavery that we had here and this, that.
Let's be fair, though, and this is not the vast majority.
Well, hang on, though.
Americans who are our friends.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Specifically, people outside of our circle. So that's why I specifically brought that up. And even I don't think he's in the chat tonight, but Royal Biscuits, who's sometimes in our chat, told me that just the other day he encountered an American in his barber shop who was trying to tell him that Britain was all built on stolen wealth from abroad, and this, that, and the other, and it had these sort of crimes of the past. So you'd be quite surprised at, especially the sort of Americans you'll get here in Europe that come over that like holiday here. You know, there is a shocking amount of Americans who are quite, you know, as are a lot of Brits, but it's a different, it's a different sort of thing ultimately.
I will attest to what Atman said. I used to go to these caravanning camping sites, clubs, holidays, and we used to get like the old American, and there was this family from, I guess they were I think they were New England, like New Hampshire or Vermont, somewhere around there. And this, I mean, this was many years ago, but they were incredibly, you know, this is when Obama had just become president, and they were incredibly, you know, massive supporters of Obama, Democrats, but also they were incredibly left wing, and they toted out the same thing about it wasn't white privilege then, but it was Britain's colonial past. That Britain, they mentioned something about Britain's shame, historic shame, and everything, and this was in relation to what was it? It was a local castle, and that was it. They went on a tirade about like conquering the Welsh or something like that. It was very bizarre.
Oh, right. Okay.
And yeah. The
what
Welsh
did they say about the? What did they say about the Tudors? You know, the British kings and queens who were basically Welsh.
Well, looking back at it, like, I mean, if I was to judge them on every New Englander, then I'd have to say that they're probably complete spastics that have no idea of any grasp of reality. So, I mean, I don't think they would even know that. But I mean, that was my first interaction with Americans, and I have met Americans since then who have been sensible, some who have been like that. I do think though. I do think within the liberal-minded Americans compared to in Britain, liberal-minded Americans are more attuned and devoted to this, this absolute fantasy, this hyper reality of the world.
You mean the Kamala Harris supporters? The ones who are going to vote for a hoe to be the leader of America. I say leader in inverted commas, of course. But yeah,
one thing I do find interesting about Americans, though, and I don't usually see this. I see it happening more in this country and elsewhere as an effect of what I would say creepy Americanization. But I do find that Americans view the world and this is going to what I was streaming with Hitman the other day. We came across this. Was Americans do view the world in very black and white terms, like in good and evil terms. And so if you and the thing is, it's incredibly childish and naive. And they end up saying and doing things in very childish and naive ways. And you look at that in the sense of foreign policy, which we've seen with Iraq and everything. And I mean, it's hard because I thought, like with the invasion of Iraq or something, that they were just using good and evil tactics, as like a casus belli to do this. But I actually think, looking back on, now I actually think that there is an element within the American system that genuinely believed it, that they were like ideologically committed to bringing democracy and freeing up and basically being the Superman of this grand narrative that they've constructed themselves around.
A moronic attitude, I have to say. Britain was in Iraq for quite a few years and lost quite a lot of guys there, and this was under Tony Blair, who certain people in our sphere, shall we say, think is a great guy. I personally think he should be executed as a traitor, but that's me. But he got quite a few British guys killed there, and we were ultimately unable to hold Iraq's second city because the British Armed Forces just did not have enough men and enough equipment to do so. And then we fought a 20-year war, pretty much, in Afghanistan, where the same thing happened. There was a period in that war where the British Army couldn't maintain a brigade group, for God's sake, in the country, in Afghanistan, against a pretty low-level threat, but it was a threat that nonetheless killed, mutilated, and wounded thousands of British soldiers. But we couldn't maintain even a brigade group there, even though the Royal Marines managed to maintain a battalion group with only 3 units, but 2.5 actually now. But it's funny, isn't it? Britain following America into wars didn't go too well for us. Hundreds of British soldiers killed, thousands of British soldiers mutilated and wounded. Didn't go too well for us on the whole, and for no purpose. I mean, it was so bad in Afghanistan that the memorial to the dead British soldiers in Afghanistan had to be dismantled, brought back to UK, because the British Army, etc., realized what was going to happen to it if they left it in Afghanistan.
Yeah,
But,
I hope you realize one of these days America is the true enemy of
hang
not just
on,
Britain, but also Europe
hang
at
on,
large.
boys, hang on. I'm just going to say this, right? I know some very good based Americans. Don the Pleb is one of them, by the way.
Is this like the Anglo version of I Have a Black Friend?
No.
Oh, okay.
No,
it's not. Don the Pleb is a genuinely good guy. He's an ex-US Marine Corps guy. And he's an all right man. And I have, through my life, like when I was in the SADF, in the South African Defence Force, back in the day, when it was still run by the white Afrikaner government, there were Americans I knew who were fighting in that. There are good based Americans, all right? The only thing I plead for on my Discord, and when I'm talking to you guys, is, yeah, the American government is a piece of shit, but then is Keir Starmer or Rishi Sunak not a piece of shit also? That's the only thing I plead for.
Right, but it's yeah, go on, Mitch.
Right. You keep saying like this is like to German, like, oh well, one base American. I go, okay, a couple of base Americans doesn't set a general trend mode, does it? Like you look at Americans in a general trend, and you realize,
I'm not,
and you realize, like, they
I'm
are the most propaganda
but there are
population
other,
on the planet.
Mitch, there are other based Americans who are basically friends of ours. People in the Old Glory Club, for example, we would basically agree with most of what they said, and they would mostly agree with what we said. All right?
Okay. And that doesn't set a general trend, though. Like,
can I
would say Iron Duke. Sorry, I would say I do watch bits of the Old Glory Club, and one thing I find very difficult watching people like Prudentialists and people in that sort of sphere is because, and I understand they stick to their own American content and everything, but because I'm not American, I find it difficult to watch it because I have a mix of little interest, but also I have a little understanding because obviously I'm not American, and so I find it very, I not tedious, but like just difficult to consume anything because it doesn't really resonate in any sort of way, which probably would make sense. But I would say though, going back to what we were saying is, if you look at the neoconservatives, their whole people like Leo Strauss, the sort of the founding philosophy behind that's caused a lot of the problems, especially on the foreign policy problems, was founded on the back of a reaction against consumer American culture in the 50s. And one of the problems, while many of them probably did, I'm not saying Leo Strauss didn't have a point, because I think I understood where he was coming from, but the problem is the legacy that he left was, this black and white foreign policy where you have like these complete lunatics in positions of permanent bureaucracy and power, who can't govern internationally, and who will give, like, for example, pressure Britain to give islands over to another power that is in bed with China, for example.
Yeah, 100%, mate. And let's be clear about this. And you guys can tell me what you've heard or researched. What I have heard is the main reason that the weak gay Starmer did this is the Americans wanted him to do it. That's why.
Yeah, I heard that as well.
That's what I've heard.
One thing I would add to that, Andrew, because they're not going to let the Tories get off this, because they also have their dirty hands in
they
this
started
as well.
These negotiations 2.5 years ago, but to give them their due, and I detest them, as you know, AI, they did walk away from them last year.
Yeah,
but then,
so
of course,
just to give a bit
the dumbest
context.
British Foreign Secretary ever, David Lammy, go watch David Lammy on YouTube when he's on Mastermind. Trust me, he's anything but a mastermind. I think one of the best things he turned around and said was, I think it was the son of Henry VIII was who, and according to Lammy, it was Henry VII. But there you go. I mean, how you can even do that is beyond me, but there we go. I'm not David Lammy. Yeah, I've heard that this was an American thing that they wanted us to do. I've heard this.
Yeah,
I don't know what Adam and Mitch think about it, but that's what I've heard.
What I heard was that, as you mentioned, it was started a couple of years ago, and it was David Cameron who sort of vetoed this as a negotiating principle, but then it was taken up by James Cleverly, and a lot of the work, negotiation, and work with the British government and the Mauritius government was done by Cleverly, who has, of course, because he's running to be the leadership of the Tory party, has used this opportunity to score political point scoring, when in reality he is
AI. He is ethnic, shall we say?
Basically, yeah. And the funny thing is, I think he actually represents, like, I think it's, his seat is like one of the whitest seats in England. White Britain, one of the whitest British seats in England.
But it's as Mitch would say, it's 75-year-old boomers who are voting for him, basically.
Yeah, I mean, he has encapsulated. I mean, I would say, to Cleverly, he has encapsulated the spirit of Churchill in many ways.
Oh, absolutely. He's destroying. I haven't even. This is one of my main points that I'll talk about in a minute, that many people will think is not important at all, whereas I think it is pretty vital, actually. But I'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, Mitch, Adam, AI is agreeing that this was at the Americans' behest. Have you guys heard that?
No, I haven't really looked into anything about that. I just
I did look into it.
It makes sense, but I also just don't think it really matters to us that much. But no, I haven't looked into it.
I got from my impression, what I got from it was that woke American government people, of course, don't want to be beholden to the old-fashioned British Empire for their main base in the Indian Ocean. and it would be far better for them to have it owned by Mauritius. And there are also Americans, like Mauritius is a big ally of the Chinese Communist Party, but there are Americans who figure that's a way of stopping Mauritius being an ally of the Chinese Communist Party. That's what I kind of turned up in my own research.
Yeah, and there's talk in Chinese media of like negotiating a building of a research station, like a totally neutral, nothing to do with the Chinese state, Chinese-backed research station, which of course any old half-wit, maybe not Hatlami, but any other village, any other village idiot would be able to tell you that that research station will just be there to monitor communications in and out those bases.
Of course, 100%. Mitch, anything you want to add on that?
Well, I'd say this. I mean, to reiterate my point about how propagandized and moronic the Americans are as a general population, you can find magatards like Trump supporters who will play rearguard for their system if you criticise how their empire behaves in regards to the likes of us and Europe as a whole. So this whole idea of a base American, it only applies to not even 1% of Americans. Like most Americans, at the end of the day, they'll still fall in with the system if you dare criticize it from like an angle of, well, you don't like what they're doing and you're like Nord Stream, or you don't like what they did to us in regards to the Suez crisis or whatever.
You're not suggesting, Mitch, are you, that the Americans blew up the Nord Stream pipeline? Because I've heard that was just a group of Ukrainians in a rowing boat. That's what I heard. It was a couple of rowing boats. The Ukrainians managed to do it.
Don't you know the guy behind you is a guy called V. Zelensky?
Yeah.
I mean, Mitch does have a point there, because there was something it was a few months ago, and it was on the BBC. It was like a short BBC clip, and they went to Tennessee, to like this rural part of Tennessee, right? And they wanted to like interview MAGA, Make America Great Again voters, like on the local level, and they came across this I guess you could say like this Christian congregation, and it was a proper mix of whites, blacks, and also Asians, like from when I say Asians, I mean like your Orientals. And the one leading it was like this Oriental man wearing like this Hawaiian shirt, and he had like this crown. He was wearing this crown made out of bullets, right? And they were all armed to the teeth. And and the thing there is they talked about love and liberty and everything. And I'm sorry, but this is the poison. This is the poison. People, the masses shouldn't have liberty and freedom. I'm sorry, but because you don't have just like crazy shit like this. You just can't have crazy shit like this going on in society, in a functioning, healthy society.
It's funny, AI, because I totally agree with general liberty and freedom. I don't agree with most people voting, and I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. I think in the old days in Britain, we had quite a lot of liberty and freedom for ordinary people, but most people didn't vote.
Well, I mean, you said you brought up voting, but of course,
but we've got no liberty or freedom at all.
I mean, I would say to Aubrey, I mean, that isn't the most. I accept it's probably not the most typical American population, but it does appear to be, from the outside looking in, the most typical MAGA supporting groups, because they do seem to be like the ultimate sort of end stage liberal organization. I mean, on the surface.
Listen, guys, I'm going to say this because it's true. The people in America who are aligned with us, who are, say, dissident right-ish, mostly, those guys are okay. And they're not going to be talking in the way that AI is talking about. Most of them are not. All right?
Okay.
They're not. I'm sorry. Like,
yeah, but we're not talking about them people. Like, that's a tiny.
Oh, okay. You're
in the
you're
same way
talking,
that the DR here is a tiny proportion of our population.
absolutely right.
But
Thank
hang
you,
on. Here in Britain, every party that wants to have even a whiff of power either has to never mention immigration or say that they're going to bring it down. Only one party in America lies about reducing immigration. The other one's very open about immigration, and they still win the popular vote more often than not.
You're right. You're right.
Similarly, America has more race riots than Britain does, but you don't see any white race riots happening in America like we've recently had here. You know, it's
based.
Both our people have been reduced somewhat.
Adam, I'm never going to slag off English and British people. I'm never going to.
No.
And you are correct about all of what you say there. All I said before you said that, which is true, by the way, was that the people in our sphere in America are not bad. They're all right. Like, most of the, I know AI said he gets bored with it. And sure, if it's just talking about American stuff, I will get bored with it too. Some of the old Glory Club stuff is not very relevant to British guys, but I don't think we would have any issue with most of those people in terms of real politics. If either of us had power, that is.
Even the old Glory Club guys, though, like I quite like Paul Fahrenheit, but if he had to choose, he would take the American Empire because the power is alluring to him. Having America as this great symbol of power. I think because he's also a young man, kind of plays into that. He's kind of drawn to it, like a.
But wouldn't we all take the British Empire if we could still have it? Because I suspect most of us probably would,
Yeah. If this was back in the day and it was the British hegemon that was being criticised for being a bit liberal. There was that guy, what was his name? Like something Ashfield or something, where he got assassinated in India because he was trying to end the caste system. Like that was kind of like one of the more shit libby moments in the late British Empire. And I bet if we'd been around in that time, we'd be sitting here making the same justifications that we hear the Americans make. But ultimately, we're not, and they are. So
I mean, if we were sitting around like in 1700, we'd be saying, what are these company men worrying about burning wives? You focus on growing in all the crops.
I think you're right, AI, but I think what Adam and I were talking about was more if it was, let's say, 1935. Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
That's what we were more talking. When the British Empire was still a rival to the Americans.
Yeah, I mean, as Mitch says, the difference is that the British Empire wasn't spreading sodomy to Europe. Yeah, and George Roy said Britons are even more propagandized. The BBC has more influence. Blah 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 blah. The thing is, as I've just pointed out, that
I don't think that's true. By the way, so Jules Roy, I know, is a big French person. And I don't think that's true.
Well, so to be fair to the average Frenchman, an English person probably does seem a bit like a shitlib American by comparison. But there's still a distinction between the two. In the same way that there's a distinction because we're in the Anglosphere and we're propagandized that much more. There is a distinction between the Englishman and the European, the continental European. But there's also a distinction between the Englishman and the American.
I've also, I don't know what you guys think about this, but I think it's an interesting question. Like, I'm an Englishman who lives in Australia, okay? And I lived in South Africa for 15 years before I even moved to Australia. My son is still in the Royal Navy, so I've still got that basic link to England and Britain. But one of the things I found quite surprising when this whole Chagos Islands thing blew up was Englishmen turning around and saying to me, well, we don't really care about Australia or New Zealand or Canada or what have you. And I get it because our governments are so shit, but, they're probably no more shit than the British government, and the British government for a long time. But there's a load of Anglo-Celts in Australia, in Canada, and in New Zealand who, as far as I'm concerned, they're my brothers, and sisters. So, what do you guys think about that?
Well, in reality, I mean, the Canadians and the Australians and New Zealanders are British. I mean, fundamentally, I mean, you could even argue most Americans we would consider British as well.
Quite a lot of them, quite a lot of them.
Yeah, quite a lot of them. Yeah, right. So they're British, but because everything has been universalized and also various laws passed in Canada and Australia and New Zealand, sort of decoupling that connection, that sort of legal and sovereign connection from Britain. Any rando on the street, if you were to say, well, what's the special connection between Britain and Australia and say Britain and say Kazakhstan or something like that, they would say, well, it's all the same, isn't it? Really, let's just do that. Those people over there, those people over here. We were just lucky to be born here. That sort of shit-lib argument that they make when you talk about immigration or demographics in this country. So, yeah, I mean, that way of thinking for us, I mean, for anyone, I mean, yes, it's true. But people have been largely propagandized to not see a difference. I mean, the classic example I would draw to is the Steve Laws and Lawrence Fox debate a few weeks ago, when he couldn't really see the difference between, say, people from Scandinavia coming to England and people, say, from Somalia or East Africa coming to England, and seeing what, because in his mind. Yeah, because in his mind there is like this magical soil theory where if they eat crumpets and play cricket or something, that makes them British. I mean, it's complete. It's his, like. I mean, it's not even bollocks. It's just complete and utter, weasel treachery, anti-British behavior.
I totally agree. Listen, I like Steve Laws and I don't like Lawrence Fox. So yeah, I'm agreeing with you totally. Steve Laws is a English and British patriot, and I don't know what Lawrence Fox is really. I mean, he needs to decide whose side he's on, basically.
I mean, he did kind of. I mean, I would say that he has like severely. If you noticed, actually, ever since that debate, he stopped replying to people like Steve Laws or Zuma Historian or other people that usually go after him, bigger accounts. Ever since that debate, because the damning thing which he stated in that was he'd be happy in theory. I think it was one of my mutual friends, Harry, not the Harry Enfield, by the way, but
sure.
Somebody by the name Harry, I think it's Harry Enfield, asked him hypothetically, would you be happy if Britain became overnight 95% African if they held British values or what he understood to be British values? And he was like, yeah. And I did see a lot of people, even reform supporters of his, or people that was his party, Reclaim or whatever it is.
Yeah.
How on earth would Britain be British if it was mostly African? It wouldn't be British. Britain is British because
but Duke, they'd all have bulldogs with little Union Jack waistcoats, and they'd all drink tea.
Yeah, they all
partake in American consumerism.
And they'd all rape girls, and they'd all rape girls.
They'd all watch Love Island.
And watch Love Island, and not have anything to do with the British whatsoever. Yeah. Britain is British because of the British people. The British people
that was
are what makes Britain British.
I mean, that one was incredibly telling because there were a lot of people, supporters on that Twitter. Because I was on that Twitter. I was listening sort of in the background that Twitter interaction. That was it, Twitter Live or whatever it's called, or Spaces. And there were a lot of people who went there as Lawrence Fox supporters who went away as basically siding, crossing the floor and siding with Steve Laws.
Steve
over
Laws
that
is
particular
too clever
comment.
for that. Look, Steve Laws is a good bloke. I like him. I follow him on Twitter, and I often repost his stuff. He's a good man who is a good English and British man. And I'm sorry, you can't argue about most of the things he says. I don't agree with every single thing he says. Like, I don't think Nigel Farage is as bad as Steve Laws thinks he is. I think Nigel Farage is boxing a bit clever at the moment. But yeah, basically Steve Laws is a good guy. I got no problem with him at all.
The problem with Farage, even I'm generally very pro Farage, is that some of it's going to be boxing clever, but some of it's also going to be, I don't want to say cowardice because that sounds too mean, but he has admitted himself before that, you know, politics is ultimately a scary place, and he doesn't want to get too far ahead of his message. And I understand why he wants to be cautious, but some of it is boxing clever, some of it is obviously him being a little
Cowardly.
A little, yeah, a tiny
bit.
bit.
I agree. I agree.
I do fear in recent weeks that Farage has been playing catch up with public opinion on, you know, and public discussion on these matters. I mean, we talk about remigration now, whether we like it or not. It hasn't been phrased that way, but there have been various stories of topics of remigration, even like just on the level of being, you know, criminals, foreign criminals in the UK, as one example. You've had that generic fellow who's been running for the Conservative leadership, also, you know, going along the identity route, which I mean, even that's been very weak in everything. But Farage has been signed, and you know, I think Farage needs to be really on top of this stuff because he's gonna reform's weak because it is the weak part of reform is it hasn't actually a defined ideology or a defined mission or goal. Now,
I think you
Homeland,
have a very good point. I do.
Yeah. Now, take
before you
Homeland
move on to before you move on to Homeland, I'd just like to get other people's views on this. And we will talk about the Homeland Party in a minute. But I look, my view is that Farage has been quite cowardly about this stuff. I don't think the biggest 70-year-old, pretty liberal, dimwit boomer in UK is going to have a big problem with deporting illegal immigrants or serious criminals. I don't think any of those people will have a big problem with that. And if you're going to go along the remigration route, those two groups are the first two groups you got to get rid of. And I don't think most really liberal boomers will have much problem with that. I mean, you know, your left-wing people will, but they're never going to support you, so who cares what they think, you know? Mitch, what do you think about that?
Well, you know my position already, but
well, yours is pretty much the same as mine, as far as I'm aware. That you know, if you're an illegal immigrant or you've committed any sort of serious crime in Britain, you're gone. Off you go. Piss off. Gone. That's how you start remigration. To me.
Yeah, I mean, the fear that people seem to have where they say you can't talk about this stuff because it's kind of political poison. There's definitely an extent to which that you do have to be careful about getting a bit too ahead of the curve. But you also do actually need to get these things into common parlance to move the public there ultimately. I don't think remigration is really a particularly radical idea in most people's minds, because I interact with the working man. I'll say I'm a man of the people. I walk out of my castle and walk amongst my people for a couple of hours a day and listen to the conversations and the commotions. On that note, I will say,
gross,
is what we were saying earlier. Yeah, but it's got to be done. I was picking something up from Sainsbury's from the Click and Collect, and I always try to like draw some conversation about politics out of the people there or wherever I go, to see, like, sort of finger on the pulse, see where everyone's at. And the guy there, he was like a sort of youngish to middle-aged guy, had a couple of young kids at home. We were talking about holidays and the cost of living and stuff like that. And he said, he turned around and he said, I just don't think anything will change until America suffers some sort of economic collapse and we become untied from them. I thought that was a really
could happen anytime.
Yeah, I just thought it was quite an interesting thing for like a normal person on the street to come out with. But anyway, but yeah, like when the guy who people were worried might be an actor, a bad faith actor, was in.
Oh yeah, I remember. Yeah.
Like, and he said, "Oh, we should like shoot him," or whatever it was. The thing is I actually do hear regular people say that sort of rhetoric all the time.
Yeah.
I work in quite a small office, and even in that office, there's like 3 people that would say something like that easily. And even most of the so-called left-wing people.
Adam and I can tell you, in working class white Australia, those views are not uncommon. Absolutely true.
And even amongst the most left-wing people in my office, most of them would agree, except for maybe one, on deporting all the illegals. So, and all the hotel migrants and stuff like that. So I don't.
All of those guys should just be sent away. They don't belong in Britain. They should just be gone.
Yeah, sure. But I mean,
and if you commit a serious crime, if you like attack a white girl, or you do some violent robbery or something like that, all of those guys just should be gone. There's no way they should still be in Britain.
But I'm Jew. Sorry, Asman, continue.
No,
I was just going to say, my workplace is a similar thing. You have it's something I've actually thought about, is that you have a few individuals who are quite left wing. You see it on like their Facebook and all that sort of stuff, and they're quite left wing, and yet when we're in a sort of larger grouping, and you do talk about subjects like immigration, which has come up a few times, because we have a few people in the office who are foreign-born nationals, who come and go every now and then, and we do talk about that particular topic. They are like as Atman said as well, that they are largely in favor of deportations, even the left-wing ones, and that's something that's quite interesting, because then when you see them in a different setting online, they're still propagating left-wing values. And I think it actually comes down to when most people, depending on what setting you're in, adapt to what the prevailing view is at the time. Whoever has who takes the lead on the conversation, they adapt themselves.
I thought that was a women thing. Women do that for sure, but most men.
Well, I will say in my workplace it is like 50-50, and the left wing people the 2 left wing I have in idea are women. So maybe that's true in that regard. Yes. But I do wonder on a sort of wider scale level that that. Because if you remember with COVID, for example, the reason why people were so, behave like little Stasi officers.
Women panicked.
Yeah.
I remember. Yeah.
Well, and also people were given. You had like these COVID marshals, and people became, you give them permission to behave in such a way that they were actually behaving that. And I actually think, that it isn't actually as difficult, because I don't think, and this is where I think people are get a bit tied up on. It's not really a question of changing people's minds. I think most people will just go along with what is said. If there was
100%.
a hypothetical based government
100%.
tomorrow, because
You're right.
this is the thing, is there are people who've been criticizing Steve Laws and in the remigration plan, people, a few at the Lotus Eaters and elsewhere, and said, well, none of it's plausible. I can tell you now, if there was a hypothetical based government tomorrow, and the state media at the time says, right, we're doing this for these reasons, and we propagandize it in a way that reaches the masses will just go along with it. Sure, you'll have like your odd,
I think you're right, but I need to ask you this. Look, I watch some Lotus Eaters on YouTube, and some of them are very good. I'm not a big Sargon fan, I got to say. I think Sargon is still basically, he's still basically a small L liberal. But some of the younger guys on the Lotus Eaters are very good. Who the hell on the Lotus Eaters complains about remigration? I'm merely asking you because I haven't seen it.
Well, I'll drop a clue. It's the person with the plate smashing name. So you get that clue.
Okay.
From the people that like to smash plates.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
People
don't understand that. I can't dislike him, but
okay, got the. I mean, listen. I like Carl, and I like Bode and the History Bro, and I like all the a lot of their content. But at the same time, don't pretend like it can't be done. Of course, it can be done if you don't want it. I mean, I understand on a personal level. I understand why Stelios, why he doesn't want it done, because there'll be a lot of people like him it'll be affected. And going back to the debate, Lawrence Fox said, "Well, if you had your remigration thing, my wife to be would also be deported." And it's like, well,
and
yeah,
I'd
but at the same
say
time, we can't.
Tough shit. But I mean,
I mean,
also, you know what? In the real world, if it was your wife, and actually your wife, we could probably allow for that, in the real world. No,
we'd never allow it.
I'm sorry, no. Come on, this is Britain and England you're talking about.
we're not making excuses for your yellow fever. They're all going back.
No, I don't even have a yellow fever these days, boys. But anyway, no, I that's nonsense. All right. If someone was actually your wife, no, that's not going to happen. Be realistic, But your girlfriend, marry her or let her fuck off. That's what I'd say.
Yeah. It was
that's
quite
what
interesting.
I'd say is marry her or let her piss off.
But you see, Iron Duke going that attack line by Lawrence on Steve Laws was the same attack line that was used many years ago during the Brexit referendum.
I know.
I know, because it was used on me. Like somebody, when I was on a TV debate, somebody asked me about that free movement of people means we have the right to love, and people like Germans and French and everything. And I'm like, and I at the time I was sort of, I mean, I wasn't really like politically awake or anything like that, but I did say, well, you can't run a society on the selfish like individual whims of one person. I mean, you can't or group of people. That's not how you run a government. I mean, even back then, I had sort of like a basic grasp on that. And I mean, I would say that still applies today. You can't run a society, for like one or two people, even if you're their friends, because it's the effect it has as a whole. It's the
not
effect
a
it
Girl
has as a whole.
Scout. It's not a Girl Scout troop.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not a club. It's not like a barbecue friend group. This is about how country.
But on the other hand, I don't think any British government I could conceive of would if you're married to someone, they're not going to chuck you out, all right? But you better be married to them, you know? That's my view. Like, if your girlfriend is that important to you because she comes from, I don't know, South America or Africa or Asia, fine, but marry her. And if you don't marry her, then yeah, chuck her out. That's my view, which I think is perfectly reasonable.
Or you implement the Isabel and Ferdinand doctrine when dealing with other groups in your nation.
I don't think we're going to go there on YouTube, AI. I don't
Well,
think
it's had
we're
little
going to go
effect.
there.
It's had
No,
little
look,
effect.
I
in
mean,
Mexico.
I don't even think that's reasonable for British people. All right, I have no problem with if you marry a girl of a different race, she can live in Britain. I got no problem with it, but you have to marry her. If you don't marry her, then she goes back. I think that's a reasonable position.
I don't know. Well, I tell you what. When I set up the Department of British Race Laws, observing marriage certificates. Well, I'll make a decision, Iron Duke. Don't worry.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, AI. But I mean, let's be realistic here, and let's also not scare people. My view is I'm happy to get rid of every Indian, Pakistani, African, West Indian out of Britain. I really am. But if they're married to an actual British person, then yeah, all right, they can stay. But they have to be married.
Of course, I'll point out that still the racial angle is a bit of a hump for even nominally what we would what the public would consider right wing people to get over. Like a couple of the Reform voters in my office when the stabby Welshman went to action in Southport, they said he was British because he was born here.
Yeah. I don't hold with that.
No, of course not.
If you're a second generation African immigrant, you're a second generation African immigrant. I lived in South Africa for 15 years. Didn't make me a Zulu. Didn't even make me an Afrikaner.
I'm sorry, guys, but Toledo Salamanca in chat. That's a brilliant comment there. It's a comment of the night.
You talking about this one?
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, exactly. If it was true love, you would go back to Haiti with your girlfriend. Yeah, absolutely right. My guess is that won't happen very much. But anyway,
I will just say before we move on, I would just see a return to the pre-1948 Nationality Act standard.
Yeah.
Which would actually mean mixed race people stay, which I know everyone will be up in arms about and say that's messy, but that's such a tiny proportion of people.
Agreed.
And it was a standard that held and worked for centuries.
Yeah, and Adam and I agree with you, by the way. The guy who is the head of the Heritage Party, I would let him stay in Britain with no problem whatsoever.
Yeah.
Even though he's a mixed race guy, wouldn't care. He can absolutely be a British and English guy. But he's an exception.
Yes.
And
generally speaking, of course, the ones that aren't an exception will go back with the rest of their communities.
Yeah, absolutely. Because
they don't have any connection here. There's nothing to keep them here if all the Gibbs and everything else are gone as well. So
if they don't get welfare, they don't get the National Health Service, they don't get Social Security money and all the rest of it. Yeah, they're all pissed off.
Yeah. Whereas someone who's already mixed race, if they've married into the community and they are integrated to some extent, they might risk it and stay. In which case you might as well, because you're dealing with such a small amount of people at that point, and they're going to get, like, not to get ultra racial, but they are going to get bleached out over time anyway if that was the case.
Yep. And you're talking about maybe, I don't know, 5% of the population at most.
Well, it'd be probably even less than that. To be fair,
it's a very small percentage of people that we're talking about.
I think at the last census they were like 1.8% or something of the population.
That sounds right.
And Mitch, to be honest, most of them wouldn't stay either.
No, I agree.
Send them all to Australia.
You bastard.
But I mean, the way Australian demographics and New Zealand demographics are looking nowadays, I'm not sure if I want to take that risk.
Yeah, no, don't do that. Mitch hasn't said any for a while, and I know he was away for a bit. What's your opinion on this stuff we've been talking about, Mitch, for a while?
Well, I mean, in terms of racial mixing, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's small everywhere, whereas I think like in New Zealand, it's like they're only like 55% European, and there's like so many people who classify themselves as Maoris but aren't actually Maori genetically.
Same thing in Australia, mate. There's many Australian Aboriginals who are like 7% Aboriginal. It's quite common. And if you looked at them, you'd say, oh, that's a European guy. But no, or more often a European girl. No, they're not. They're 7% Aboriginal, so, you know.
Yeah, because it's quite weird. I mean, I wonder how many mixed race people would just pivot towards being English all over again if, like, let's say the wheels turn the other way in towards like an English nationalist government or whatever. How many of these
I think quite a lot would, but so long as they do that, and so long as they're actually married to a real British person, I'd say, yeah, all right then.
Yeah, because we're talking, I mean, you can imagine with like normally mixed race people, let's say they identify more with the African side of them or whatever, because, it gets them a better chance of getting a job or whatever. But let's say the wheels were to turn tomorrow, they'll all of a sudden pivot back to their Englishness. What would you say about that?
Yeah, again, I don't know if Ammon and AI would agree with me, but my own view would be it would come down to family and marriage. If you're actually married and it's actually your family, of course I'm not going to chuck you out. But that's going to be a tiny number of the first, second, and third generation of immigrants in Britain. It's a very small number that are actually intermarried.
And we're assuming that by that point, it'll be on top of a legal structure which dissuades any outgroup political organisation anyway.
Yep.
So
yep. Totally
whoever's left, just won't be any sort of issue at all going forward.
I mean, it
would be small number of people. Sorry, AI. It would be a very small number of people you're really talking about. Let's carry on.
Just think about it. You could. I was just thinking you could like levy a tax, like an interracial tax. You know that's one idea.
Well, I wouldn't do that, but yeah, you could. I wouldn't do that, but then.
Well, I would do it.
Yeah, I'm an English British guy, so I wouldn't do that. But I would say
I'm an extremist, so I would do it.
Well, I'm an extremist according to most people, but the point is, I wouldn't do that to people who were actually married into a real British family. I wouldn't do that to them. I wouldn't. I'd say that's all right. And as Armin just said, and Mitch just said, you're talking about a very tiny number of people when you talk about like people who are actually married into British families. It's not many at all, actually. Very small.
Sorry, middle-aged men of England, you can no longer get your Philippine wives.
No, again, I wouldn't even stop them doing that, mate.
Oh, Duke, you fucked it now.
No. Middle-aged, I possibly might give a certain advantage to a Japanese wife, but But in general terms, no, I wouldn't get involved in that. I don't think you need to get involved in that. Like you're talking about getting rid of about 20% of the British population. And most of those guys have nothing to do with any person who is actually British. You know, Anglo-Celtic, English, Scottish, Welsh, or Northern Irish.
Duke, you're making me more extreme now.
All right. But you are
Actually,
talking about, you're talking about people, if like I said, even if you look and you allow someone to stay because they're married into an actually British family, you're talking about a tiny percentage of immigrants. Because
yeah, but I'm kind of talking about pre-existing marriages, not allowing it to continue into the future.
Yeah, you don't give them 6 months to.
The only time after the base government comes in, at which some race mixing, new marriage should be possible, is some new British redcoat who's gone off to conquer some faraway land, and he's brought back a war bride. But there should
absolutely right, and absolutely right. And myself, if an Englishman married a Japanese girl, yeah, I'd let her come in, but. You know, that's not going to subvert Britain, basically, you know. But yeah,
no Orientals, no Orientals. We're banning. After this conversation, I'm pretty convinced we're going to put a ban on Orientalism, and we're going to put a ban on African and and big Kazakhs and.
I won't agree with this. I won't agree with this, but we are talking about. I don't know, 0.5% of the population at most. You know, it's despite what the BBC, the Bias Brainwashing Corporation, tries to show you, mixed marriages are not very common. They're not.
Well, it's a lot less than 5%.
I mean,
but,
yeah, it is.
I do want. You know, like the old TV, like the old information ads, like these old information ads, and you'd have like, washing machines, and you'd have like and tumble dryers, and you'd have like, remember, whites and colors don't mix, and there's like the old information ads. I wonder what would happen with the public if you just like replay that constantly on TV over and over again. Like, would that influence the mind? Could you brainwash the public?
Are you guys too young to remember when we had real information ads in between TV programs, like in the old days, when they would?
Yeah, I don't. I think
they talk about Carnarvon Castle and stuff like not Hoovers, not mixing stuff in your wash. They talk about Carnarvon Castle or the Kentish Weald or something like serious. Because I'm old enough,
when I was at school,
remember those.
When I was at school, we did have like this laminated thing where it was like, remember, white and colours don't mix. You know, like when we were doing our washing thing. So maybe that's what radicalized me. I don't know, but this is
I was always radicalized to an extent because I was always like a British Empire loyalist, and
I see people share. I see. Sorry, Andrew, but I see people sharing this book around about like armor and guns from like the 15th and 16th century, and it's basically like it was just a book like detailing like the types of European armor, guns, and crossbows, and hand cannons and all those sorts of things. And it's like, if you read this as a child, then you probably grew up to be like a right-wing extremist. And I'm just thinking, I think I did. There was that book. I do remember that book in school. I do remember going over it.
No, never did. The funny thing is, when I was a young man, I was quite into miniature war games. Like when I was a kid, you know, little 15mm figures you painted as British redcoats and what have you. When I was like, I don't know, 9, 10, 11, I was into that stuff. That's why I used to spend my pocket money on. But the funny thing was, never was into the 16th century at all. I always thought that was one of the most boring eras of history. But then, of course, I was an Englishman, so to me, the 18th and 19th century, when the British Army went around destroying the French everywhere, that was kind of my big deal. But yeah.
I mean, you do have like Vlad Tepes. I mean, he's quite entertaining, sort of figure. You got the various Italian wars as well, but I mean, there's nothing. I mean, you're right. There isn't like a proper good sort of like conflict defining thing you can really sort of attach to.
It's all the 30 Years' War, and it's all a mixture between armor and guns and pikemen and muskets, and it's an unsatisfactory mixture. It's only when the Swedish king Gustav Adolphus comes along that it starts to make some sense.
I would say the Spanish conquests of like the Aztecs, the Mayans, the Incas, and so on.
Good luck to the Spanish. Good luck to the Spanish.
That's I recently purchased a book called from Kevin Spiel called The Voices of the Conquistadors, and it's one of the books I did like a refined search of like non-ship livery historian content on like the conquistadors, because of course all of them are going to be evil racist bigots that wanted to oppress brown people and all that sort of stuff. And so I managed to find him taking like letters and journals from this one there's one of like one of the people there that could actually one of the scribes, I imagine it was a scribe called like Sancho or something like that, and he was he just detailed like conversations and like events, how it unfolded, and I mean, pretty interesting stuff, and how tolerant they were of the human sacrifice stuff until it got to the point where they were offered like to eat human flesh, and it was like Cortez was like, no, this is stopping now.
We can't do this. I'm sorry. Yep.
Yeah, it's like, we're not doing this now.
Mitch, you haven't said anything. What do you think, mate?
I don't really have much to say on this. I mean, in terms of childhood books or whatever, I mean, closest thing you've got is Lord of the Rings for me, from what I.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's about England and Britain for sure.
Can I just point out though, because you brought up about miniatures, and it made me think that like people my age or younger, the only miniatures we had was possibly like Space Marines.
Yeah. You guys did 40K and stuff like that. Yeah.
There's this sort of like historically accurate miniature. It basically died just as I was growing up.
They're still around.
They are still around, but they're just they're not. It's just not the done thing. But there's other toys as well. I was thinking of the other day, like Scalextrics and Hornby, right? Like the Hornby factory is not far from where I live.
I had both of those when I was a kid.
Yeah, so did I. I think everyone who I knew growing up had one or the other.
The train set and a racing car set. Everyone had those. Yeah.
But and like in my local toy shop when I was a kid, they like Scalextrics was so big at that point. They had a separate till and like booth station just to sell, like in a sort of toy department store sort of way, just to sell Scalextrics, because there was so much variety in that. And I went on the other day. I was talking to someone about it because they were clearing out and they found one, and we were talking about it. And I went and looked at the site.
Adam, sorry to interrupt you, but some of them are actually worth quite a lot of money these
Well,
days, by the way.
Generally speaking, the antiques market has absolutely fallen apart.
Yeah.
And a lot of stuff that we would have considered worth a lot of money like 5 years ago is now worth absolutely nothing.
What a surprise.
People just don't seem to be interested in their history at all, or any history for that matter. And even like with these Hornby sets, you know, Hornby now, they only have a small collection of trains, not that many actually, really not many steam trains. I was quite surprised at. And some of their train they sold, they don't sell
They're
it now, but they sold.
enormously expensive now
Yeah,
as well.
yeah. Some of the trains, just the train, not a set, but just the train. One
Yeah.
of them was £500.
Yeah.
But they actually sold for a limited time. They even sold the Pride flag train, you know, the one they painted recently.
God, no.
So between the prices and stuff like that and their crappy selection, it's no wonder no one buys it.
I should ask you guys, because I've never asked this, all right? And I did this with my boy when he was a little boy. Did you make like airfix ships and aircraft and stuff? Because I used to do that with my son when he was like 8.
Yeah, we did. I did with my dad. We did a train, but one that I remember more vividly was the Golden Hind, Drake's ship.
Yeah, I
Golden
made
Hind. That was a good one.
Yeah, you could get that. You could get HMS Victory. Airfix used to do HMS Shannon, the ship that beat the American frigate Chesapeake. Yeah, I made all those things with my boy, but also like Wellington bombers and Spitfires and Hurricanes and
Hawker as well.
Hawker under Jetfires, and yeah. Did you guys do that when you were?
Yeah, I did. And when I was a kid, I know that like everyone I knew had Airfix models. Every boy, they would have them, you know, hanging from the ceiling of their bedroom or on shelves.
That's what you did. Yep, that's what we did. Yep.
And I mean, even I had some. And actually, funnily enough, in the small cluster of villages where I grew up, none of those villages, outside of the one I'm in, even have a pub anymore, let alone a local shop. But back when I was a kid, like in that little cluster of about 4 villages, one of them had a bloody model shop that was in the middle, and all the kids used to ride to the model shop on their bicycles. And they had a massive selection of Airfix stuff in there. Airfix is one of the few brands that does still have a semi-decent selection, but
and it's very British and English as well, by the way. But yeah.
But it's
the model shop.
It is sad to see how that sort of vestige of like English childhood that Mitch might have never seen, but you know, that has died. It died in the Blair years, as far as I can work out. Like, someone pointed out, someone reminded me on Twitter of that book, The Dangerous Book for Boys, that they used to sell in Waterstones, that came out in around 2005. Sometime after that was when a lot of this stuff finally bit the bullet.
Early 2000s.
Yeah.
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
I remember everyone's childhood after that was an American childhood, essentially.
Mitch, did you
it's funny
see this stuff?
I don't know what this is. I can't say I have. I mean, it's not my childhood. I mean, closest thing I had to this was, I don't know, sometimes, you know, you go to a shop and you pick up like a history magazine or whatever, like certain like magazines like that.
But Mitch, you never like had a model of, I don't know, HMS Victorious, the aircraft carrier, or you know, a British frigate from the 1980s, or a Mosquito from World War II, or a Spitfire. You never saw that stuff?
One time I had a Spitfire, which I had to assemble.
Yeah. You used to have to make them and then paint them, for sure. Yeah. But they used to be really common. Like when I was a kid, every little boy had loads of stuff like that.
I think, to be honest, I don't mean to I don't think I can diagnose why a lot of this stuff went away. I do think, obviously, Tony Blair and the sort of cultural revolution that he wrought had played a part. But I do also think that like single motherhood played a big part in this, because like I was only introduced to that stuff partly, not as much as most of my friends, and that was only because my grandparents helped raise me, and I had my grandfather around who was like a father figure. But if it had kind of been left to my mother, obviously a woman doesn't really understand a boy's interest in that stuff in the same way that a father would.
Yeah,
so
100%.
that the rise of
Yeah,
that definitely harmed a lot of
Yeah,
those
it was
things.
my dad who
yeah,
showed me how to make an aircraft model or a ship model. And yeah, you're right, Am, 100%. Your dad showed you that. And like I said, I did that with my son.
I was going to say, when I was living in Devon, similar thing. Our nearest model shop also had like army surplus gear, deactivated guns you could purchase, as and all that sort of stuff, and models and also like a mini sort of museum. So it was all sort of like multiple things rolled into one. And yeah, I mean, the funny thing is, it did close down in 2005. It did close down, and we used to love going there because you could go there. There was like helmets from these were real helmets that were from the First and the Second War, German ones. I mean, I remember there was a Waffen SS one there. What was that big brigade? The Night was not Nightingale. I forgot the name. Forgot the name now. But
AI. I'll give you an example. When I was a little kid, right, I bought some Airfix 20mm World War I Germans, and I converted them by like cutting bits off them and painting them into British Zulu or soldiers from 1879. My old man came home one day and he said, "Did you do that?" And I said, "Yeah, Dad." And he said, "Cool. It's pretty cool." And I even ended up converting some Airfix 20mm Highlanders into Zulus, because they were the closest you could get back then to that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah. You had to make tiny cardboard shields for them and stuff like that. But what
was great is I remember my parents purchasing. I think my dad purchased for me was they made like for children like list these little shields. Norman shields and swords and everything, and
you could buy those.
And also I think they also got me an archery set as well, like a little archery set as well. But me and my friends, we would go off because we lived like in some nice like wooded area, and because this was a time when Lord of the Rings had come out, we would go off and just pretend we were fighting orcs, or we were rangers or something, or the Dunedain Rangers or something like that. We'd just go off and play. And the thing there is, when you had, I mean, as Atman said, this was at a time where it was largely discouraged. That sort of behavior in boys was largely discouraged, and a lot of others weren't. Other boys, when I remember, weren't in on it because they had largely become feminized, largely feminized. They were sort of.
I don't get that, you see, because when my little boy was like, I don't know, 6 or 7, I bought him extra toy guns because people didn't like it. That's why I bought him extra toy guns, because people didn't like that. And I was never like some sort of feminist.
Well, I mean, I remember like when I was a kid, I used to have like a toy M16, but I took it away from me because I kept trying to shoot Blacko with it.
You had toy M16s, you had toy 9mm, toy Colt 45s, all of those. You could buy them when my son was little in the early 2000s. You could definitely buy those.
Yeah, I used to have a toy M16. I used to take with me to school at times when I took it away from me because I kept aiming at a black kid with it.
So I thought you were going to say you hit the guy in the head with it, but there you go. Whatever. Yeah, I just don't get that shit. I really don't. All right, I'm now going to bring us to the main point of this stream. And I think it's quite serious. You know, they always say the sun never sets on the British Empire. Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
And it doesn't at the moment. But if the British Indian Ocean Territory, the Chagos Archipelago, is sold to Mauritius, and actually not sold, we're paying them for the next 99 years to own it. Have you ever heard a worse deal in your life? That's what, you know.
We've already talked about this, haven't we? We've already covered this.
No, we haven't.
Yeah.
We haven't, no, we haven't. If the British Indian Ocean Territory, the Chagos Archipelago, is actually given away, and we pay for giving it away, as two-tier care and the Labour Party want to do, the British Empire, the sun will set on it. The sun will actually set on it for the first time ever. So the end of all our ancestors' hopes and dreams, merely because of two-tier care and anti-British David Lammy.
Well, I mean, I kind of feel like that all ended a long time ago, and this is just a sort of like a post-game kick in the teeth.
Yeah. I feel, Adam and I wish the British Empire was 100 places around the world, but 14 is better than 13. That's my view.
I mean, I said earlier about it, and it's just another. This was a plot conspired by a Tory Defence Secretary, Labour government, and the Americans. I mean, it's kind of. I mean, this is the plot of Curtis's Ocean and Apart. So, I mean, yeah, the Tories, Labour, and the Americans doing what they do best. So I don't. There's nothing else I can really add to this. I mean, yeah, they're scummy, horrible people who will. I mean,
agree. But
they would probably. They're like crack addicts. They're like crack addicts. They would probably sell off Cornwall to pay off their dealer if they had a chance or something. I mean,
for sure.
They're terrible people.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know. Maybe you guys are not getting what I'm saying. The sun never sets on the British Empire at the moment because the sun is always shining on one or another of Britain's overseas territories. If you sell off the British Indian Ocean Territory, it won't.
Mm-hmm. I understand.
You guys probably don't care. You're very young. You probably don't care. But to me, that is like a destruction. It's a big destruction.
No, I understand. It is a symbolic loss. It's a difficult one because, I mean, as has been said, I mean, when we think about the empire, I mean, the empire was condemned many decades ago. But it is the end. This is like an end, and it's ended in a very similar way that the British Empire that we all conceived is ended through American foreign policy shenanigans by their allies in the British state.
And we're told this is an American desire too, under Biden, of course. Well, not Biden, because Biden doesn't know what day it is, but whoever is running America at the moment, which ain't Biden.
But I think the sad thing is, like back in the day, you did have people in that time of what you would call decolonization in the Cold War period. You had people like Richard Hilton and Glubb and other people who did care about the British Empire and Britain in keeping British power.
They kind of loved it
in the empire together.
They kind of loved it. Yeah.
They did love it, and they were devoted. And you had the people in Rhodesia and South Africa, and today that's all gone, and those people aren't there today. I mean, there are people in you got people in the British officer corps today who are either indifferent,
anti-British, basically,
or anti-British, yeah. So I mean, it's a difficult one because it's sad, but at the same time, and I've seen people like Steve Lawson, not Steve Lawson, Zuma historian, saying, like with the Falkland Islands stuff, it's like, well, why should we care? Because the mainland is in dire straits as it is. Why should we care? Now, I do take a different view. I think
me too.
Whether it's the Falklands, or so, if we start saying the Falklands, then then what's stopping Norway wanting Orkney and the Shetlands back, or Caithness back, or anything like that? I mean,
the people in the British Falkland Islands, over 2,000 of them, they're British. They vote to stay British, and Britain lost. And Britain lost almost 260 dead people from the Royal Navy, the Royal Marines, the Army, and the Air Force to take them back in 1982. As far as I'm concerned, that's a blood debt. It's a blood debt. Those islands are British forever. And I know
I would not surprise me if Starmer
I joined the army the year after the Falklands War. I joined the army the year after the Falklands War. I know Royal Navy sailors, Royal Marines, British Army guys who fought in the Falklands War. And if two-tier care wants to get rid of that place, he'll be cursed into eternity because their mates died in that war to take it back.
But hang on though, what are they going to be more angry about? Him handing over the Falklands, or what he's done to the rest of Britain in that time? I imagine the latter.
Both, because they're the same. Both because they're the same. They're the same, and both.
And also, actually, that's someone that Mitch mentioned in chat. The population there don't want to be governed by Mauritius, and that's the same thing. The tragic.
No, they don't. But I don't even.
No, hold on.
They were barely able to.
Hold on. But my point is that during is what Hilton said. Again, this is the same thing. There was no moral unity for the breakup of the empire, because in Nigeria and in India, the public were largely dead set against the end of British rule. And when it did happen, the resentment against the British was that they thought. I mean, a lot of in India, the blame for the violence. The reason why they blamed the violence after independence, like the millions killed, but when the population
couldn't blame themselves, could they? couldn't blame themselves.
But they couldn't blame themselves, no, and it's obviously is on them, but they blame Britain because they the blame was, well, you lot gave up on India. Now, I think that's a ridiculous argument to make anyway, but there is something to that in all these circumstances of forced decolonization, again, it's not like the population really wanted it. There's not like this desperate need from within.
No, there never was.
It was only a vocal minority. Yeah, I mean, India was like a small minority.
Middle class minority wanted it. Yeah, got it.
Yeah, for largely ethnocentric reasons, which I understand. You know, ethnocentric reason. I do understand it. But
I understand them, but I don't care. I would have locked them all up or killed them. But whatever. But yeah. Serious, I would have. But I mean, I don't give a shit about the Chogassian fishermen who were almost making a living, and Britain moved them donkeys years ago and gave them money to move. And I don't give two shits about those guys. I really don't. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not suddenly getting, sort of affected by brown people. I'm not. I don't give a shit about those Chogassian fishermen who were barely making a living, who Britain gave money to move to Mauritius. Fuck them. I don't care about those guys. It's only British.
Chogassians.
I only care.
Chogassians aren't real, though.
Yeah, but
they're not real. They're not real.
I don't give a shit. Honestly, I'm maybe worse than you think I am, but I only care it's British territory. You never give up British territory ever, because if you do, then Argentina will want the Falkland Islands and Spain will want Gibraltar. And I'll be honest. Like, I know I've had John say this to me. I would happily tell every young Anglo-Celtic man, go and join the British Armed Forces, if I thought the wars we were going to fight were to defend Gibraltar or the Falkland Islands. I would. My problem is I don't want British young men to join up and fight American wars, or even worse, Israeli wars. That's my problem.
Just a bit of a side note on the Chagos on thing. I believe when Parliament comes back, they'll have a vote, because Keir Starmer has to have a vote in Parliament.
They pretty much have to, yeah. And Farage and many other people have pointed this out, that, Keir Starmer thought he would get this through and no one would notice, and he's come mightily unstuck.
Yeah, so I suppose. But I mean, I hate to say, but I'll have to email my MP about it.
Yeah, same.
I mean, I hate to say it, but given the Labour majority that exists at the moment, they're going to vote it through, aren't they?
Yeah.
I mean, we're not going to be hoping on Labour MPs to do the right thing.
Probably, but yeah. I hope not.
I mean, James Cleverly, in theory,
I think Starmer thought this would go through and no one would even notice it. That's what I think he thought.
Surely not.
Yeah, I really do, Adam. And I think Starmer thought this would go through while Parliament wasn't sitting and no one would say a word. Because it's a little group of islands,
Well, he's a fool because it's
he's a fool.
It's good red meat. It's red meat. I mean, presumably James Cleverly would have to vote with Keir Starmer because he's the one that drew up a lot of the proposals for this. So he's on board. I imagine he would be.
I hope he won't. I did also notice Lord West has written a letter against this, and you know what? I don't like Lord West because he's the former head of the Royal Navy and introduced quite a lot of like feminist bullshit into the Royal Navy. But he has at least complained about this and said it's against British interests, basically. So, it might not go as nicely as two-tier care hopes. So we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, Stormy really is that stupid. Like, I mean, what was the word? Because apparently he doesn't have an internal monologue in his head, like most normal people
he
do.
He doesn't have a conversation constantly going in his head, like almost all of us do.
Yeah. So in other words, when he does an action, he doesn't he doesn't have an internal monologue about.
So he's a low IQ moron. Okay.
With a high score for sociopathy or psychopathy, whichever word you want to use.
Wow.
Yeah. To put it blunt, I mean, yeah, you can sum up Starmer to was vicious idiot.
You couldn't. Like if Starmer wanted to fuck off the real British Anglo-Celtic people in the 9 weeks or 10 weeks he's been in power, I can't think of any worse way he could have done it. Like every single thing he's done, from freezing Granny to locking up people for tweets and letting go sex offenders and giving away British territory. Is there anything he could possibly have done worse?
Well, he could like sell St. Edward's crown or something. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to give him ideas at this point.
All he could have done. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's not even possible to imagine how bad Starmer has been. I mean, look, I never vote for the Labour Party. I've never ever voted for the Labour Party. I always thought AA's 0 seats was shit, and I said vote Reform, not Labour. But yeah, I can't think there are many like actual British Labour voters, not immigrants, but British ones, who think they made a good decision voting for two-tier care. I can't think there are many.
In chat? Is Victor Calaroso? Calaros?
I can see him.
Yeah. Is he Spanish? Because if he's Spanish, you cannot be objective on this question of Gibraltar, sir. You cannot be objective. You have your own prejudices.
I have no idea if he's Spanish, but if he is, you're never getting Gibraltar.
Get out.
Yeah,
get out.
Gibraltar is British. Gibraltar is British in perpetuity. That means forever.
Yeah.
Forever.
It's a give land back to the Vikings. I mean, mate, the Vikings had, they arrived
from the Vikings. I don't think we pinched any land from them. Mitch will know more than me.
He's talking about the Dane. Well, he was talking about the Dane law, and to be honest, the Moors. I hate to say it, the Moors of Andalusia have a claim to the Spain. Then by that logic, which they don't, of course. Spain and Hispania is Christian and everything else, but
was won back by the white Spanish people. Yeah, the white Caucasian and Spanish people won Spain back over quite a long time.
Yes. Who opened the gates to them? Don't answer the question, guys.
The trap.
Irish.
Mostly Tony Blair. Tony Blair and his small-headed allies, shall we say.
Yeah, it was a fucking leprechaun's vomit.
Yeah, no, it was Tony Blair and assorted small-hatted allies, although before that, you have to say it was also the Labour government in 1948, but very small numbers back then.
Yeah, Victor, don't worry. We knew you were joking. It was just, I picked on you because you had the Spanish name, so I thought I'd just pick on the weakling in the chat.
AI, anything you would like to plug? What are you doing in terms of streams and videos in the near future?
Well, I'd like to. We're going to continue with the Richard Hilton stuff. I think, especially with what's gone on recently,
Cool.
with the with the the handing over of the British Indian Ocean territories and the risk of further overseas territories like the Falkland Islands, like South Georgia.
I'll happily join you on any of those streams, AI, if you need a guest. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I might even do a separate dedicated stream to actually go through like each overseas territory. There isn't that many, so we can quite easily cover them, and like the Ascension Islands and even the bases in the peninsula, small peninsula bases in Cyprus, Akrotiri and Deucalion are accounted.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
Starmer will hand those to Israel or something like stupid like that. So yeah,
more
no
than
doubt.
likely. Yeah, 100%. I'll join you for any of those, mate. Do check out AI's channel on YouTube. It's called AI Shriatori. Excellent channel. It's got some good streams and videos. Go check it out. Mitch, anything you wanted to promote or last words?
Nah, not from me.
Adamant, same story. Anything you wanted to promote or?
No, nothing. We left a lot of news on the table this week.
We did, because we were talking about giving away British territory, which in my opinion, you never do. But next week,
on the final, I was just say on the final point, Andrew, I just say, because I will mention it very quickly. Everyone go check out the Homeland Party various speeches, and I was very pleased with what came out of that. And I think it's a diamond in the rough. I know people were, some of the speakers and everything, they said, well, could have worked on it, but they can work on presentation and everything. But I would say on the whole, it was very good. Do check it out. It's on YouTube and I think on Twitter and some people's Twitters as well.
Hey, did you go to the conference? Because I did.
What, the Homeland Party?
Yeah.
No, I didn't go. I didn't go. No.
I thought I might have missed you.
No,
I went.
How was it?
First one. So, generally speaking, very little teething problems. Obviously, stuff they can build on. The numbers were really good for a first conference for any group. I think I'm not sure if I should say actually, but I think I can. I'm pretty sure they sold like 150 tickets or something, or somewhere around that margin.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good for a first time.
I mean, that was. I believe that is 3 times what the Witten did on their first.
It's pretty
event.
cool. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
And there's more talk to come as well, I believe.
100% support for the Homeland Pie. You said, and we missed some stuff. We did. All right. And I wanted to make this stream pretty much about Starmer not giving away the British Indian Ocean territory, but charging the British taxpayer for giving away the British Indian Ocean territory.
Yeah, but there's also the Dawn Butler story to talk about as well.
No, I want
we
to
can talk about that next week.
We will, and I will also flag up another story I want to talk about next week, which is Lucy Letby, the English nurse who was, I think, falsely convicted of murdering children in a premature baby ward where, premature babies, sadly, they die. I think her conviction is extremely unsafe. And I'm not the only person to say that. Like, loads of other people have said it who are much better known than I am. But yeah, I think her conviction is unsafe. And next week, Alman, I'm very happy to talk about your subject as well as Lucy Letby and other stuff. I'm sorry, this week was kind of like a remnants of the British Empire stream, if you like. So, yeah.
I mean, I'm Duke. I wouldn't be promising topics for next week because, as Mitch said, by this time next week we could be in all out.
Yeah.
Conflict mode.
It's a toss up. It's a toss up. Is Israel going to get us in World War III, or is Ukraine? One of those two shitholes is very likely to get us into a nuclear World War III. And me, I don't care about either of them, I gotta say.
I'm Duke. The ultimate Chad behavior for the stream next week is if it does happen, where it's like all-out conflict and we're all in, and our nations are all involved. The ultimate Chad thing to do would be to come on and just talk about, Dawn Butler and Lucy Letby and not even mention it.
Yep. Probably find it hard if half the nation I love was a nuclear wasteland. But yeah, I see what you're saying. But yeah, absolutely.
Get my threads out.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you very much to my guests this week, Mitch, AI, and Adaman. You can agree with us or not agree with us. I think we have made a good case that you don't give up British territory, And I'm going to play us out with this tune for the reason that I know guys who fought in this war, and because of Two-Tier Care's choice to make the British public pay for 99 years to give the British Indian Ocean Territory to Mauritius, which has never had anything to do with it. The Argentinians are saying they're going to do something to take this place back. And of course, the fucking Spanish are also saying they're going to do something to get Gibraltar back. But, that's what happens if you give up British territory. So, yeah.
Rules the waves. Britons never, never, never shall be slaves. Off the coast of Argentina, our island's midst the deep, with 1,800 people and 500,000 sheep. The day they were invaded, everybody learned the name. A barren level colony had got a bit of fame. We stocked our ships full of British beer and bullets. We mobilised the navy and we called up the Marines. We sailed 2 weeks till we reached the Falkland Islands, so we could teach a lesson to those bloody Argentines. Maggie Thatcher was awakened in the middle of the night. She heard the Argentinians were spoiling for a fight. She summoned up her cabinet and met with the MPs and set the pride of Britain to those stormy southern seas. We stocked our ships full of British beer and bullets. We mobilised the navy and we called up the Marines. We sailed 2 weeks till we reached the Falkland Islands, so we could teach a lesson to those bloody Argentines. Well, in came the Yanks, who had to have a say, so they sent Al Haig down Buenos Aires way. He shuffled to and fro, always managing to smile. The Argies still refused to leave that barren British Isle. So we stocked our ships full of British beer and bullets. We mobilised the navy and we called up the Marines. We sailed 2 weeks till we reached the Falkland Islands, so we could teach a lesson to those bloody Argentines. Well, the whole world watched as the British fleet drew near, and the battle for the Falklands was finally here. We sank their ships, brought down their aeroplanes, and taught those cheeky Argies not to mess with us again. We stocked our ships full of British beer and bullets. We mobilised the navy and we called up the Marines. We sailed 2 weeks till we reached the Falkland Islands, so we could teach a lesson to those bloody Argentines. Argentines. All the local girls were waiting when Prince Andy disembarked. He had a reputation that he liked to have a lark. They covered him with kisses, they walked him in the grass. He said he never saw a better piece of British land. So we stocked our ships full of British beer and bullets. We mobilised the Navy and we called up the Marines. We sailed 2 weeks till we reached the Falkland Islands, so we could teach a lesson to those bloody Argentines. We stocked our ships full of British beer and bullets. We mobilised the Navy and we called up the Marines. We sailed 2 weeks till we reached the South Atlantic, so we could teach a lesson to those bloody Argentines. Go on! Clear out of it! Go on back to the Pampers! Go on, clear out! No, you can't play bloody football either!
All right, boys. I don't actually get adverts because I have ad block for YouTube on Mozilla Firefox, and I keep seeing everyone in my sphere saying, yeah, we're getting ads now. Well, if you want to stop them, get Mozilla Firefox and put ad block for YouTube on there. I never see any ads.
It's not working. It's not. The ad blocks aren't really working for you, then, are they?
Well, I didn't see any ads on that, mate. You guys may have, but I didn't because I've got Mozilla Firefox. But you know what? If ever I'm in the position where I have to watch adverts on YouTube, I'll stop using YouTube. I'll just stop using it. Like, I never see any adverts on YouTube. As soon as I do, I'll stop using it. Simple as that. I'll go to
I do
any other platform.
I do get the most common is like dating Muslim women. That's the one I get a lot of, which
Well, that's a shame. That's a shame.
Yeah, I mean, well, I presume they want me to convert to Islam because that's the only way that it works, really, isn't it?
Yeah, but honest, as soon as I'm not joking, guys. Like, I've been on YouTube a long time. This is episode 192, I think, of this show. And yeah, when I have to watch adverts on YouTube, I just won't use YouTube. But at the moment, you can use Mozilla Firefox and put ad block for YouTube on it. And what happens is when you go to a new video or stream, you'll see all sorts of things in front of it in terms of this, 15 seconds, 25 seconds, this sort of stuff. And then it will stop and you can just watch the video or the stream without any adverts. But the day I can't is the day I won't use YouTube anymore, because I'm never going to watch adverts on YouTube or anywhere else for that matter. But yeah, thanks this evening to my guests, Adam, Mitch, and AI. Go well, guys. Never let the bastards grind you down. And
See you later.
Don't accept the end of the British Empire. Yeah, I'm trying to find it. That's what I